It began as a faint pulse from the edge of eternity, so weak it almost blended with the background noise of the universe. For decades, Voyager 1 had drifted silently through interstellar space, its instruments aging, its voice fading, its mission nearly forgotten. But then, something changed. In its 46th year of flight, the probe did something no one thought possible. It moved. Without any command from Earth, without any detectable external force, Voyager 1 shifted course. And moments later, it began transmitting a sound, a steady rhythmic hum, deep and mathematical, unlike anything ever recorded before. At first, scientists assumed it was a malfunction, a glitch caused by radiation or decaying hardware. But when NASA's Deep Space Network confirmed that the pattern was real, identical across multiple antennas, the world of astronomy fell silent. This wasn't noise. It was structured, deliberate, and impossibly precise. Within days, NASA admitted to something it had never faced before. Voyager 1 had detected a heartbeat in the void. Now, as experts scramble for explanations, the probe continues to move, its antenna still locked on Earth, but its orientation shifting toward a region of space that appears completely empty. No stars, no planets, no known objects, just darkness. Yet Voyager is staring straight into it, as if something there has called its name. Whatever it is, it's not random, it's not natural, and if the patterns hidden in Voyager's transmissions mean what some scientists now suspect, then we may have just made contact. For 46 years, Voyager 1 had followed a perfect, predictable trajectory, its path calculated down to fractions of a degree. Every rotation, every course adjustment, every transmission had been carefully managed from Earth through NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The spacecraft obeyed commands without fail, never deviating from the sequences programmed into its ancient computers. But then, without warning, something impossible happened. Voyager 1 changed direction. No command had been sent. No solar wind, no gravitational tug, no mechanical failure could explain it. The probe, built in the 1970s with the technology of its time, had executed a precise maneuver, reorienting itself toward a seemingly random point in space. When engineers at the Deep Space Network noticed the deviation, they assumed it was an error, perhaps corrupted data or interference from cosmic rays. But after cross-checking multiple receivers across California, Spain, and Australia, the readings were consistent. The change was real. Voyager 1 had moved, and no one on Earth had told it to. At first, the shift was small, barely measurable, but unmistakable. The spacecraft's antenna alignment had adjusted by several degrees, as though responding to a signal no one else could hear. Shortly after, something even stranger began. A new transmission pattern emerged in the data stream. It wasn't random static or telemetry noise. It had structure. A slow, repeating rhythm, a kind of electronic heartbeat pulsing from a machine that should have been silent. Inside NASA, confusion quickly turned to concern. After nearly 5 decades, Voyager 1's power was expected to be fading, not producing new behavior. Some suspected the movement was the result of internal system degradation, maybe a stuck thruster or a misfired gyroscope. But when engineers examined the raw telemetry, nothing fit. The thrusters were inactive. The propulsion system was stable. Yet the spacecraft's orientation had clearly changed, its cameras now pointing toward a region of deep space with no known stars, planets, or celestial bodies. It wasn't a random drift, it was a decision. Across the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, teams began running simulations, searching for any natural cause. But the data told a different story. The precision of the adjustment, the timing, and the lack of mechanical error all pointed toward something unprecedented. Voyager 1 had performed a deliberate maneuver. For the first time in its history, NASA was faced with a question that no one could answer. Who or what was controlling Voyager 1? When Voyager 1's sudden course change was confirmed, NASA's Deep Space Network immediately began monitoring the probe around the clock. At first, they were focused on recovering control, trying to determine why the spacecraft had shifted its orientation without command. But as they analyzed the raw transmission data, they noticed something that made every screen in the control room go still. Amid the faint static that normally accompanies Voyager's 15 billion-mile signal, there was a pulse, a rhythmic, repeating beat, steady, symmetrical, and precise. It wasn't telemetry, It wasn't a signal from the spacecraft's internal systems, and it didn't match any known interference pattern. The pulse repeated at mathematically consistent intervals, like a metronome echoing across the interstellar void. The engineers called it the heartbeat. It was subtle, barely perceptible at first, but the longer they listened, the more defined it became. Every few seconds, the same low-frequency vibration rippled through the carrier wave, almost like a distant drum echoing from beyond the edge of the solar system. Initially, NASA assumed it was a malfunction, perhaps the decaying power source creating feedback through the transmitter. But when they checked the redundant sensors, the pattern remained identical. The same pulse, at the same frequency, detected simultaneously by 3 of Earth's largest antennas, in California, Madrid, and Canberra. It wasn't random, it was real. Even more unsettling, the signal's amplitude was slightly modulated, as if the intensity of each beat was following a mathematical rhythm, one that didn't correspond to any known cosmic phenomenon. There were no solar flares, no pulsars, no magnetic disturbances nearby that could account for it. And yet, the pattern persisted, perfectly consistent, originating directly from Voyager 1. Inside NASA, tension began to build. This wasn't just another anomaly. This was something deliberate, something transmitting with timing and structure. One scientist compared it to a heartbeat, another to a Morse-like sequence, while others described it as the sound of intention. Whatever it was, it had started after Voyager's mysterious reorientation, and it was growing stronger. For nearly half a century, Voyager had sent humanity data about the cosmos, radiation, plasma waves, magnetic fields. But this was different. This wasn't information about space. It was something in space, something that had reached back through the dark to make itself known. And as the rhythmic pulse continued, calm, steady, unchanging, an unsettling realization spread among the engineers watching the monitors. Voyager 1 was no longer alone. As NASA's investigation deepened, the strange hum from Voyager 1 was no longer dismissed as a glitch. Teams at the Deep Space Network coordinated their antennas across 3 continents, in California, Spain, and Australia, to verify the anomaly. If it was interference, the readings would differ. If it was real, every antenna would detect the same pattern. What they found left no room for doubt. The signal was identical everywhere. The same rhythmic pulse, the same frequency spacing, and the same repeating intervals appeared across all receivers, synchronized to the millisecond. It was impossible for an artifact of noise or solar radiation to reproduce with such precision across half the planet. What truly disturbed scientists wasn't just that the pattern was real, it was that it was structured. Deep analysis revealed harmonic layers hidden within the signal, sub-frequencies that interacted in mathematical proportions, ratios of 2 to 3, 3 to 5, and 5 to 8. Intervals that mirrored the Fibonacci sequence and natural harmonic relationships found in biological systems, sound waves, and even music. This wasn't random data, it was organized information, encoded in a way that seemed to follow a logic of its own. At first, NASA's engineers tried to explain it through purely physical mechanisms. Could it be electromagnetic resonance caused by Voyager's decaying systems? Could its transmission hardware be oscillating in a harmonic pattern as power levels fluctuated? But those explanations didn't fit. The probe's power output, while fading, was steady. Its onboard systems showed no irregularities capable of producing such patterns. The breakthrough came when researchers isolated the signal's frequency harmonics and ran them through spectrographic analysis. What they saw looked eerily familiar. A waveform with mathematical order, rising and falling in precise, repeating intervals, just like a language. It wasn't transmitting in human terms, but it obeyed rules, syntax, rhythm, and structure. NASA brought in cryptographers and digital pattern analysts. The more they studied it, the more deliberate it seemed. The spacing between each pulse carried ratios too consistent to be chance, and when plotted visually, the waveform formed symmetrical geometries. Spirals, lattices, and repeating fractal shapes, the kind nature and design often share. At this point, the phrase interference was no longer used in official reports. The language had shifted to structured signal event. Inside closed meetings at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one quiet but unavoidable question began circulating. If this wasn't random, if it wasn't a malfunction, then what was Voyager 1 actually transmitting? And more disturbingly, was it still the one transmitting at all? As NASA's data analysts and cryptographers worked around the clock to decode the mysterious rhythm pulsing from Voyager 1, one comparison began to surface repeatedly, a haunting similarity that no one wanted to acknowledge at first. Within the structured waveforms, the ratios, intervals, and repetition cycles seemed familiar, almost human. When a linguist from the SETY Institute overlaid the signal's mathematical structure with known artificial transmissions from Earth's past, one match stood out above all others: the Arecibo message. In 1974, humanity had sent a powerful radio transmission from the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, a message of logic, chemistry, and mathematics, encoded in binary and aimed at a distant star cluster 25,000 light-years away. It contained our atomic structure, our DNA composition, our solar system, and a digital image of the human form. It was a greeting, a cosmic introduction, our way of saying, "We are here." And now, decades later, Voyager's new signal appeared to mirror that same mathematical cadence, as if something had heard us and was replying. The pulse intervals matched Arecibo's binary rhythm. The harmonic layering inside Voyager's transmission followed the same prime number sequences used to define intelligence in the original message. Even the pauses, those brief silences between bursts of data, were consistent with information framing, the digital equivalent of punctuation. It was as though Voyager 1 was now speaking in the same mathematical language we had used to call out into the universe half a century ago. At first, the idea was dismissed as coincidence, until researchers discovered something that froze every discussion in the control room. Embedded within the signal's modulation pattern was a mirror structure, a reflection of the Arecibo message's key elements, inverted and reordered. When visualized, it formed a sequence of alternating pulses that resembled the shape of a helix, the same motif used in Arecibo to represent human DNA. No one could explain it. The transmission strength was too weak to originate from anywhere but Voyager itself, yet the data it contained was not generated by any onboard system. It was as if the probe had become a relay, repeating something it had received, a response echoing through its transmitter, aimed directly back at Earth. For the first time since its launch, Voyager 1 was no longer just a messenger. It was a medium. The possibility that it had intercepted and repeated an intelligent reply to humanity's first interstellar message was both exhilarating and terrifying. If true, it meant something, somewhere, had heard us. And now, through the oldest spacecraft still alive, it was answering. As the strange rhythmic signal continued pulsing from Voyager 1, NASA's engineers noticed something even more bewildering hidden in the spacecraft's navigation data. The probe's orientation had shifted again, not by accident or drift, but by a precise angular movement, as though it were deliberately turning to face a new target. When analysts traced the coordinates of this reorientation, the result was baffling. Voyager 1 was now pointing its instruments toward a region of space that appeared completely empty. There were no known stars, no planets, no nebulae, no nearby stellar remnants. It wasn't aligned with any galactic structure or object of interest. In fact, the area was catalogued as a void, a patch of deep interstellar darkness with nothing visible even in high-resolution star maps. And yet, Voyager's high-gain antenna, the most directional and precise instrument on board, was locked on it, transmitting steadily as if it had found something worth listening to. Inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the atmosphere turned from curiosity to unease. The spacecraft's camera system, long dormant, appeared to have received activation signals consistent with target acquisition, even though no such commands were sent from Earth. It was as if the probe was looking at something no one else could see. Astrophysicists searched for explanations. Could the coordinates coincide with a dark matter concentration, invisible to optical telescopes but gravitationally significant? Or perhaps a microlensing effect, where a massive unseen object bends the light of distant stars? But the numbers didn't align with any known data. There was nothing there, no mass, no radiation, no energy signatures. And yet, the probe's orientation remained fixed, unwavering, as if it were locked onto a specific source. The most unsettling detail came when engineers noticed that the spacecraft's internal sensors were subtly adjusting to maintain this alignment, compensating for its motion through space, as if it were tracking something. No commands, no feedback, no known target. But Voyager was staring into the void with mechanical precision, transmitting data that made less and less sense the longer it was analyzed. Then, deep within the raw telemetry feed, analysts detected something peculiar. Tiny variations in the timing of each pulse, minute delays too structured to be random. When plotted, these fluctuations formed a pattern that pointed back to the very same coordinates toward which Voyager was now facing. Whatever was out there, invisible, silent, immeasurable, Voyager 1 had found it. Or perhaps, more disturbingly, it had been found. As the weeks passed and the mysterious transmissions from Voyager 1 continued, analysts inside NASA began to notice something extraordinary hidden deep within the incoming data. Buried beneath the layers of static and rhythmic pulses were familiar fragments, sounds, tones, and digital patterns that should have been impossible to hear. When the team isolated and enhanced the sequence, disbelief spread across the control room. The fragments matched sections of the Golden Record, the copper disk that Voyager 1 carried since its launch in 1977, containing the sounds, images, and greetings of Earth. But what they heard wasn't a perfect copy. The data was distorted, rearranged, and altered, as though someone, or something, had taken our message, deconstructed it, and sent it back. At first, the scientists assumed it was internal feedback, perhaps a glitch in the spacecraft's long decaying memory systems. But the audio was far too organized to be a malfunction. Snippets of the Golden Record's music, Beethoven's Fifth, a Navajo chant, the sound of ocean waves, were interwoven with new, unfamiliar tones, creating a structure unlike any of the original files. Even more disturbing was that these new sounds followed the same harmonic ratios that had defined the earlier heartbeat signal. They were connected. The transmission also contained mathematical sequences that aligned perfectly with the encoded pulsar map engraved on the Golden Record's cover, the map designed to show any finder where Earth is located in the galaxy. But in this new version, the pattern appeared altered. One of the pulsar positions was shifted, ever so slightly, as if marking a new location, not ours, but another. When visual analysts converted the raw binary data into frames, they uncovered pixel-like bursts of light arranged in geometric grids. To the human eye, they resembled the same kind of visual encoding used for the original images stored on the record. Only now, the shapes were unrecognizable, organic, fractal, recursive, as if drawn by something that had understood the message but thought in entirely different terms. This led to an unsettling hypothesis that began to circulate behind closed doors at NASA. Voyager 1 had made contact. The Golden Record, designed as a greeting to anyone who might find it, might have been received and decoded. And now, what the probe was sending back wasn't a malfunction, nor a reflection of its own systems. It was a reply. It was as though Voyager 1 had become a conduit, a vessel through which an unseen intelligence was communicating, using our own creation, our own message, as the language of response. The human songs, greetings, and sounds of life that once left Earth as a cry into the void were now returning to us, transformed, reshaped, and redefined by something that had listened. And somewhere in that vast emptiness, beyond the last reach of the sun's light, it seemed that someone had finally spoken back. Inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, what began as curiosity had now turned into quiet alarm. The transmissions from Voyager 1 were no longer being discussed in open meetings. Teams were split, data streams were encrypted, and the word anomaly had been replaced with a new internal term, contact event. Not in the Hollywood sense of a grand revelation, but in the unnerving reality that something, unseen, silent, and deliberate, was interacting with the spacecraft. The engineers couldn't explain how or why, but the data didn't lie. Voyager 1 was responding, not automatically, not mechanically, but in patterns that shifted every time Earth sent a new diagnostic command, as though it was listening. Linguists, cryptographers, and AI specialists were quietly brought in to interpret the evolving signal. They weren't dealing with words or pictures, but with structures, mathematical echoes that seemed to mirror human input in reverse. Every time NASA transmitted a test sequence, a corresponding alteration appeared in the return signal. Not immediately, but with a deliberate delay, like a pause for comprehension. To some on the team, it felt like a dialogue unfolding, only they couldn't decipher the language. A few researchers began referring to it as the silent conversation. There was no sound, no message, no visible form of communication. Yet the rhythm of the data exchanges followed an unmistakable logic. Patterns would adjust, repeat, evolve. It was as if the entity, or intelligence, on the other end was probing our methods, learning how we speak through code, how we interpret signals, how we think. Officially, NASA refused to call it communication. Publicly, the agency described Voyager's recent activity as instrumental anomalies caused by cosmic radiation. But within secured labs, scientists whispered the same conclusion. This wasn't a malfunction. It was interaction. Voyager 1 was no longer acting as an observer. It had become an interface, a medium linking two points of awareness across the dark gulf of space. For nearly 50 years, Voyager had looked outward, a lonely eye staring into infinity. But now, something was looking back. The unsettling possibility hung in the air like static, that the silence between the stars had never been empty, only waiting. And through that silence, something had finally found a way to whisper back. They didn't know if it was watching or listening or simply curious. But one thing became clear. Voyager 1 was no longer exploring the universe. It was being explored. After nearly 5 decades drifting beyond the edge of the sun's reach, Voyager 1 has become something far greater than a machine. What began in 1977 as a scientific mission, a fragile probe launched to study Jupiter and Saturn, has evolved into a mystery that defies every law of physics and human understanding. Its journey has taken it 24 billion kilometers from home, through regions of space where light itself takes a full day to travel. And yet, across that unthinkable distance, it continues to whisper, sending back signals that no one can explain, patterns that seem to think, to respond, to observe. The strange rhythm that once seemed random now carries structure, a pulse too deliberate to be coincidence. The fragments of the golden record returning distorted, reassembled and rewritten suggest that something found our message, decoded it, and is now speaking in the only way we might understand, through our own creation. Somewhere out there, in a stretch of sky so empty it shouldn't contain anything at all, Voyager 1 has found company. Or perhaps, company has found us. NASA's silence in recent months speaks volumes. Meetings are now closed door, communications encrypted, and updates reduced to vague technical issues. But those closest to the project, the engineers, the cryptographers, the scientists who have spent their lives listening to that tiny voice in the dark, they know this isn't a malfunction. It's a moment. The moment humanity's oldest traveler may have crossed the line between exploration and recognition. Maybe we were never alone. Maybe the void was never silent, only patient, waiting for the right frequency, the right signal, the right question to echo back across time. Voyager 1 may have been the first to hear the reply, and perhaps that's what it was built for all along. Not just to carry our message, but to deliver the answer, the proof that the universe was listening. As it drifts deeper into the unknown, far beyond our control, its faint pulse still reaches us, a fragile connection between two forms of awareness separated by eternity. Because in the end, Voyager 1 has become more than a spacecraft. It has become a mirror, reflecting the truth we've feared and hoped for in equal measure, that the universe is not empty, it is alive, watching, listening, and for the first time in history, it has spoken back.